Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dhanyavad everyone who's got to be Krishna, to be Vicara, Gaudiya Vaisnava. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Vastaya Gotale, Semate, Gour Govinda Swami, Nimai Pandit, Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prema Priyan Sakupan. Dhanyavad everyone. So we're carrying on with the encapsulated glories of His Divine Grace, Srila Gour Govinda Swami Maharaj, His Divine Grace, Acharya Thakur, great Mahabhagavat Paramahamsa, Gaudiya Vaisnava Acharya in our line. And in the first series we discussed this book, Krishna Gita Vigraha, which was part one of the life story, encountering Gour Govinda Swami. Who was he? They're all about the glories of our beloved Gurudeva. Just try to learn the truth. Mayapur 1979, which is actually a very important book. Vrindavan 1975, in the Association of Pure Devotees. And from that book we took this information, the Acharya, the Brahman and the Shilpi, and the exalted Bhakta Bhagavata. And then finally we printed this one as just a brief understanding of the glories of our beloved Gurudeva, the 108 Splendours. And I've just received the latest copy of the life story. Here it is, the new volume 1. It's called Always Embraced by Krishna. You'll see it's nearly as big as this book, but this is only part 1 of volume 1, and part 2 is coming, so it'll be double that thickness, part 2 of volume 1. Then we will do volume 3, part 1 and part 2, which will be just as thick, nearly 700 pages or more. So last week we ended off speaking about he was humility personified, and we discussed how I have to say this, and when the deities were installed in 1991, we were all there. Param, you were there, right? Jagadish, you weren't there, right? No.
I was in my hall.
Srila, you weren't there, no. So anyway, Prabhu, you were there, right? No, you weren't there, okay. And some people came that were very horrible to Gurudeva. Very horrible. And Guru Maharaj hugged them, gave him a big hug, was all happy to see them. And I was standing there with Parabrahma and I said to him, oh, I don't understand this. These people are so horrible to our Gurudeva. They were sannyasis and gurus and whatever they were, you know. And they were so horrible to Gurudeva. Gurus were so happy they came for the installation of the deities and the installation of Srila Prabhupada's Murti. Guru Maharaj was so happy, he hugged him, was smiling, was beaming. And even these people thought it was pretty strange that Guru Maharaj gave him a big hug. Because, you know, when you're offensive to someone and horrible, you sort of tend to stay away from that person anyway. And here he is, he comes up to you and he's all happy to see you. Because Guru Maharaj, he didn't have any hate in his body. There was no hate. And as I explained last week, he couldn't criticise anyone. And as Rupa Goswami has written in his 5th verse of the Pradeshamrita, Anyanindadi Sunyaridam, pure devotee is free from the propensity to criticise others. So he was humility personified. And he would seated on Vyasa roar like a lion, whereas other times he was just like a child, like very quiet and very humble. And right, like you'd go in to see him in his room, and you know, I'd knock on the door. Yes, Gurudeva, it's me. I've come to do the correspondence. Come. And I'd pay my obeisances, and then we'd do the correspondence. And he was so humble. It was just, sometimes he would get angry. There was a few instances where devotees were doing some very strange things, and Gurudeva would start to yell, and you're the secretary, so he'd just yell at you. And you're just sitting there writing down, being yelled at, and like, whoa. But yeah, one time there was one brahmachari in the deity room, and he was he was definitely not doing the right thing, and Gurudeva was yelling, get him out of the deity room, get him out of the deity room, get him out of the deity room. I was thinking, how do I put that in a letter, because it was so ferocious coming out of Gurudeva's mouth. How could I write that down? But anyway, I sent the letter, get this devotee out of the deity room. And there was another time, this aspiring devotee, he was going to get married, he was going to get married to one Mataji, but she was older. Now we're in another country, not India. So Guru Maharaj looked at me and I read the letter and he said, so, and in the letter the temple president said, oh, we do this in the Western world. We do this, that the wife can be older. Guru Maharaj looked at me and he said, we do this in the Western world, as if, as if saying, oh, well, it's okay then. And then he went into this whole talk about how nonsense it is, and we just don't do that. It's not part of Vedic culture. The wife is younger, the husband is older. There has to be a sadhu, has to be an astrologer. If the charts aren't done or that sadhu isn't there, that tree-coloured sadhu who knows your past, present and future, how can you put two people together, he said. It's all nonsense, he said. And then he, in a very loud voice, said, yes, it's all right. We do this in the West. Yeah, what is this, he said. So I'm writing it all down. And another time, one brahmachari, he, very rare in Orissa, a brahmachari fell down. Isn't it, Jagadish? I mean, very rare. Those brahmacharis, the only way they go is they leave their bodies. Right? That's how they go. These Oriya brahmacharis, they don't fall down, So this brahmachari had fallen down with this Mataji. And one fellow who had a centre in Puri had given him a room, because Guru Maharaj had rejected him, so he'd taken him down to the Ganga. Sika had gone, neck beads, Brahma thread and beads, all in the Ganga. This devotee was now rejected, and Gurudeva would write it in the register, this person is now rejected, and the date. And then that fellow that had the centre in Puri wrote to Guru Maharaj and said, well, he's a big collector and collects a lot of money. And I was the evening darshan, and Guru Maharaj was walking around the property, and Guru Maharaj is there and I'm standing right next to him, and he just starts yelling at me, so, doing illicit sex, and I'll give you a nice room and a nice prasad because you collect a lot of money. And I was like, I didn't do that. And then I went to Chaitanya Chandra and he said, yeah, this devotee explained it. I said, all right, because I just copped it, I just really got it. So anyway, there were a few instances where Guru Maharaj got really, 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 really heated because it was not correct what was going on. But in general, we would go into the room and it was just like a lamb, isn't it? Lion on the chase, a lamb at home. Lion when preaching, lamb in his room. So yeah, he was very humble, and on the Vyasana he would roar. And I remember when we were in Belgium, Gurudeva got to Belgium, and he was at Radadesh, and he started speaking and he started roaring, and devotees were looking at each other because they'd never experienced that in their life, No one roars. Who roars? No one roars. Only when you see lions, they roar, but you don't see. Usually the sannyasi comes in and sings Jara Madhava, whatever he does, and chants the verse to the best of his ability, and then gives a bit of a class, and c'est la vie, finished. But this was someone who was roaring, he was roaring at the top of his voice, and he was trying to smash the illusion of all these people. So yeah, on the Vyasana he would roar. And if you were very close and you weren't paying attention, whack, you would cop it. Isn't it? If you were very close, you got it. Or the cane would come out. Now this is number 71. So this is 108 Splendours. You can see it on the net, but he was able to read people's minds. While speaking Harikatha, he would answer people's questions that were formulating in their minds, and before they could even present their questions verbally, He had already answered it. Many, many persons witnessed this. And this, Gurudeva giving a class, and you know, we're talking 2, 3, 4 hours of heavy Siddhanta, not just... And something I didn't mention that rather us to me is that the Siddhanta of the Gaudiyas is not vegetarianism, karma, reincarnation, everybody's suffering, adi yatmik, adi bodhik, adi daivik. You're not the body and spirit soul, right? All spiritual groups present this information. Brahmavadis, Mayavadis in person, everybody, yogis, jnanis, they all present that information. But the Siddhanta of the Gaudiyas, according to Srila Bhakti Saraswati Thakur, starts at Guru Tattva, Bhagavad Tattva, Vaishnava Tattva, Krishna Tattva, Guru Tattva, Nityananda Tattva, Advaita Chandra Tattva, Avana Dhamma Tattva, Ashram Dhamma Tattva, Sambandha Tattva, Abhidaya Tattva, Prayojana Tattva, Radha Tattva. So Guru Maharaj was presenting this. He was presenting Gaudiya Vaisnava Siddhanta Tattva. He was not presenting, you're not the body, spirit, soul, because even A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada said, hey, understanding you're not the body, spirit, soul, it's not enough. This is entry-level information. So Guru Maharaj would speak very, very, very deep Harikatha, and people would be formulating a question in their head, and he'd look at them and answer it while in the course of his class. And then after the class, people would come to me and say, oh, you're not going to believe what happened. And I'd say, what happened? And they'd turn around and say, right. And then after another day, someone else would come up. Always people coming up saying this, you know. He's reading my mind. And that's what he did. And I remember I had one experience, and I know you shouldn't talk about yourself so much, but this is an experience that glorifies Gurudeva, so I'll present it. So, in the beginning of 1989, there was myself, Dinabandha Prabhu and Jagapati Prabhu. We went to Mayapur looking for Gurudeva, but he already left the night before to get to Bhubaneswar in time to greet the Westerners that were coming, because Westerners were coming to Bhubaneswar. So we went to Mayapur, and there was one big sannyasi guru who I wouldn't pay my obeisances to, and he figured out I didn't pay my obeisances to him. I just walked by him and said, this person is, I'm not going to pay my obeisances to him, because I'd heard what he'd said. He contradicted himself in 2 different countries and made lies out of everyone, like as if everyone was nonsense, even though it was 2 contradicting points. I won't get into all that. So then this fellow cornered me and made me pay my obeisances to him. Hare Krishna. And he was a big man, and I wouldn't do it. And then I thought, gee, this is getting very embarrassing, you know. So I just did it. He was all happy. And he said, oh, it's very good for me and it's very good for you. I said, okay. And I walked off, you know. So I didn't tell anyone because it was a bit very strange. Very strange. So anyway, then we'd been there about a week in Bhubaneswar. And Guru Maharaj was giving a class, and he says, the sadhu, if he's real sadhu, before you've even paid your obeisances to him, even mentally, he's already paid his obeisances to you. So I thought, yeah, great. He says, but a demon will force you to pay your obeisances to him. And I was totally shocked. Because I thought, how did he know? He's pointing his finger right at me. And I hadn't said anything to anyone. And this went on all the time, and I'm writing volume 3 of the life story, and there's just so many devotees saying this, you know. He's reading my mind, he's reading my mind, he's reading my mind, he's reading my mind. And presenting, and then rearranging it so everything fits in, the Siddhanta fits in my mind properly, not erratically, you know. So then I had this other experience which was even more extremely very strange, more exaggerated. To go to CRP, because I used to go and buy fruit because I couldn't eat the prasad. So I'd go to the shop and buy some fruit and nuts. And you had to go out the front gate. And the hut was there, the veranda of the hut was there. Gurudeva would sit on his seat and be chanting, you know, just be chanting. So one morning I walked out and I saw Guru Maharaj. I wasn't yet initiated, but it was a given that this is our spiritual master. And we'd been searching everywhere. We'd been to Europe, all over India. We'd been everywhere looking for Guru. Not that that's what you do, but that's what we thought you had to do. We couldn't hear anything that resembled anything that we needed to be associated with. Anyway, so I saw Guru Maharaj. I paid full dandavats in the dust. You know, you get to come up, you got all dust all over you, red dust of Orissa. And I looked at Guru Maharaj, and there wasn't a soul there. Not one person. And Gurudev's head was bent down as if he was paying his obeisance back to me. And I looked around, and it sort of freaked me out. And then I went like that, and I walked out the gate. So I never used that gate again. Because if Guru Maharaj was there, I didn't think that was, you know, I didn't really think that anyone should, you know, do that to me. But that was how humble he was. He was so humble. He was so humble. And reading people's minds, left, right and centre, and that's what the sadhu does, is treat Kali Gyan. That's why that's why the sadhu has to come if you're going to get married, because he has to see, are they compatible? Is one a demon, is one not a demon? Etc, etc, etc. Not just get together. And Guru Maharaj was against this whole Western thing, you just get together and see what happens. Trial and error, he was against that. He didn't feel as though that was a very good thing to do. He said in one class, he said that we're giving training to you Westerners especially. We're trying to give you training, but it's very difficult for you to understand. So number 72, a very special feature of his preaching was that he would often sing, not quote or chant, but sing the verses from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Sri Chaitanya Bhagavatam, the songs of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and the songs of Srila Narottam Das Thakur in the class, in the middle of lectures. This unique style of preaching was completely unheard of in this kind up till then, up till now. Maybe some people do it now because I've seen Gurudeva do it, you know. And I remember when we first got there, and Guru Maharaj started singing, it was like, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Deva Rati Mati Bhava Bhaja Prema Kalapatarudata. Remember that song? That just threw me. And one devotee leant over to me, whispered in my ear, this song, Gurudev singing this song would wake the dead and make them dance. That's what he said in the middle while Guru Maharaj was singing. I went, yeah. It was totally amazing. And it caught you off guard. And when he got to the West and did it, and then one day it was at Jai Dharma's farm, and he said, excuse me, Jai Dharma Prabhu, but now I'll sing a song glorifying the Vaisnavas. And he broke into this song. And they're like, all the devotees are like, wow, you're at Jai Dharma, you came. Yeah, you came. Yeah. So number 73, another very special feature of his preaching was that he would, prior to speaking the Srimad Bhagavatam, glorify the Srimad Bhagavatam for 20 to 30 minutes, and then he would begin the lecture. This unique style of preaching was unheard of, unprecedented in this gone up till then, up till now. Gurudev said when he got back from America, the first time, they said to him, Swamiji, you've got 15 minutes to give the class. And Gurudev said, my introduction to the Bhagavatam goes longer than that. Isn't it? My introduction to the Bhagavatam goes longer than that. And then the class would begin. Especially in the West, he didn't quote all the verses. He quoted some verses and spoke, quoted some verses and spoke. And that introduction at Karoi he gave to the Bhagavatam, I'd never heard one like that before. That is a they're all brilliant. This is super brilliant, excellent introduction. And the devotees are like, wow, and then suddenly it's like, okay, now we'll begin the verse. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and then he'd go into the class. So it was totally amazing. Another very special feature of his preaching was that he would, prior to speaking on the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, glorify the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita for 20 or 30 minutes before he began the lecture. Again, this was completely unheard of in this country. And he would glorify Mahaprabhu. And that was that song, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Deva Rati Mati Bhava Bhaja Prema Kalapatarudata Braja Rajanandana. And it's the songs of Narottam Das Thakur. Why Mahaprabhu appeared in Nadi and the reasons he appeared. And the classes, number 75, the classes, it wasn't just a quick class, half an hour, 45 minutes, fill in the gap, you know. I've been through a lot of classes, like on the net you hear people speak, this TV, that TV, of devotees, and you're waiting for the, you know, the big bang, the point. Where is the point? Where is the, you know, where am I going to get some juice out of this class? And nothing comes. No offence, me too, I'm nothing, but nothing comes. But when Gurudev spoke, from that very first line to that very last line, right, there was an enormous bang, right, a crescendo. It built up and built up, then it exploded like fireworks. And then he'd say, okay, thank you very much. And he'd take his glasses off, take his books, so we get up and go. And you're sitting there, wow, what just happened? Especially for first timers, that was a total shock for them. So he would speak 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. I remember one class, I got in to do that. I had to fight to get in to do the correspondence, you know, and the secretary, the servant's trying to lock me out. And his brother, I said, Prabhuji, no offence, but I'm Guru, my secretary, I have to do the correspondence. Said, oh yeah, sorry. Because you had to lock the door, otherwise everyone would be in the room. So I get in, and Guru said, I've spoken a long time. What time is it? I looked at the clock and said, Guru, it's 11:45. He went, he was shocked that he spoke that long. So he never had breakfast. There was no breakfast for Gurudev because he just spoke straight through breakfast. No Westerner had breakfast because we were all at the program, right? Till the end, and then Gurudev would have breakfast and then we'd have breakfast. So there was no breakfast, it was lunch. But he, and that's what many people said, he relished speaking. It wasn't some arduous task, I have to give class, what can I say? I have to fill in time. What if someone asks me a question? What if I don't know the answer? Blah, blah, blah. He said, there was none of that. No. So, number 76, he was most concerned about the well-being of his disciples and followers. Very concerned about people. And I even remember when we picked him up for the first tour of Australia, and we were on the way back to the Brisbane ISKCON Temple, and we were like halfway there, and then Guru Maharaj turned around to me and said, no, I was in the front, Guru Maharaj was in the back, and Chaitanya Jagapati was driving. And he went, Nimai, all those devotees at the airport, I said, yes, he says, do they have a lift? Is there a car for them? I said, yeah, there's cars in there. He said, oh, okay. He's thinking, oh, what about these people? And on the way back, there was a place called Video Rama. And Guru said, what's that? I said, well, that's a place where you rent films. He went, oh. He said, well, due to their previous security, they've been allowed to use the name Rama. They will get benefit from saying that name. And then there was is it 3X or 4X for the beer, that big brewery? 4X?
4X.
4X. I said, see that, Gurudev? He said, yeah. I said, that's a brewery. They make alcohol. He says, oh, poison. Liquor is poison, he said. They make poison there. People are drinking poison, he said. Went into a whole thing about how people drink poison. Liquor is poison. So he's very concerned about people. He's very concerned about his disciples, and he was really worried about if his disciples got into trouble. He was worried. I remember one Maharaja, I won't say a name, and he said to me, what are we going to do about this Maharaja? What are we going to do? And this brahmachari, what are we going to do about him? He'd call me and say, what are we going to do about this? And then he said, we'll do this, and I'd write it all out, and then I'd go and send off a letter. I might have to ring him, or Gurudeva would ring him, or, just to sort out the problem. He was able to melt the hardest hearts. I think the only hearts he didn't melt was the Rakshasas. Oh no, some Rakshasas came and they couldn't believe it either. And I've said this before, but devotees came. Devotees came and they weren't devotees. We're not devotees, we're aspiring devotees, right? But aspiring Vaishnavas. But they were doing all sorts of strange and wonderful things. But they were surrendering to Gurudev. And one fellow went back to his place of origin, and they said to him, something's different about you. What did you do in India? He said, I took initiation from Srila Gour Govinda Swami. And these people didn't know who Gurudev was, and they said, well, Srila Gour Govinda Swami must be one very powerful devotee, because you have changed immensely. This fellow was a total ratbag. And there was another fellow, he came to Orissa. He's just going to travel around India, have a good time. After the first class, he was in there paying dandavats, please initiate me, please initiate me. And that was going on all the time. So yeah, Gurudeva could melt the hardest heart, because he knew, you see, when the sadhu sees the conditioned soul, he doesn't see, oh, how much money does he have? Or she's very attractive, can I have sex with her? He's not thinking that. Guravo Bahavo Santi Sisha Vita Paharaka Dulaba Sadguru Devi Sisha Santa Paharaka. He's not thinking that. And that's what Lord Shiva says to Parvati. He says that there are many gurus who accumulate disciples for sex and money. But a Sadguru, he's interested how he can deliver this person. So when he sees you, he's looking at you, he's thinking, how I can deliver you. And he knows what your problem is. Right? And then when you speak, you're saying one thing and he gives an answer to something totally different. But that's the answer for you. Gurudeva, I'll start a big business for you. I'll do this. I'll do, oh, very nice. I appreciate that. Very nice. Thank you very much. And then he say, I want you to stay here for 6 months. Just listen to Bhagavatam class, okay? Yes, Gurudeva. or whatever he would say to that person, you know. And number 79, he tolerated and cooperated with those who were unjust, ruthless, and tried to work against him, of which there was quite a few, whilst relentlessly working to resurrect their fallen mentality. Guru said to me, it's one thing for people outside the family, means outside the Sangha, outside the branch of your particular mission. Your branch, no. Your particular branch of the mission. He said, that's one thing. But the brothers and sisters to attack you like this, he said, it's a very nasty thing, he said. You don't expect that. But envy is what it is, isn't it? And that's how it functions. Envy is like that. We have to attack you. Hence in 1995, Gurudeva gave that lecture, Society Without Envy. He said, it was just my luck I got that verse, he said. And I had to speak on it, Society Without Envy. And he said, he made the point, a Krishna conscious person is not envious. How can a Krishna conscious person be envious? Huh? Yaman pasati savata savam jamani pasati. That's what Guru Maharaj quite is. This is a Krishna conscious person. Right? Sees everything in me. Right? He's never lost to me, I'm never lost to him. Sees me everywhere, sees everything in me, Krishna says. And Gurudeva said, in one lecture in English, he says, bring the book. So he brought the Gita, he opened it up, he says, yes. Here Prabhupada says, Yaman pasati savata savam jamani pasati. And he says, in the purport, he says, question of love. Krishna conscious person is love. Love means Krishna praying. That's a Krishna conscious person. How can you be a Krishna conscious person if your mind, intellect and ego are not pacified and are not controlled and are not disintegrated? Right? Diminish the subtle body, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Sri Bhakti Loka, develop the spiritual body. That's what happens, right? So that's a Krishna conscious person. There's no more subtle body. He thinks, talks, walks, sees, eats, smells, everything, speaks Krishna. Gurudeva said, we're not interested in... First thing he said to us actually, when we first got in the hut and we saw him and he was sitting there totally effulgent, there was only one lamp on, Gurudeva was sitting like this, we were sitting there, and a million other Aureas crammed in that room. I don't even know how they got in there. Nuhari was there, someone else was there, and there was back to see the three whiteys that come to see Gurudeva. And there was a lamp here, and the Bhagavatam in his book, and he's just translating, and there was no other lights on, and there was a window behind him, but the curtain was drawn, and he was just on fire. He was just glowing. And why does the Krishna conscious person glow? Really glow? Because in his heart, he's vibrating, he's emanating prema. This is sneha, chit dip dipana, ujvala nilamani, Rupa Goswami. He's totally, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, in the 5th chapter of Jivadharma, that sadhu, that Premi Bhakta exudes prema from every pore in his body. He just glows. And Gurudeva was just glowing. So a real Krishna conscious person is, Gurudeva said to us, Krishna conscious person, we don't accept 50%, we don't accept 60%, we don't accept 99%. 100%, then he said, not even 100%. He must be over the 100% mark, must be 101%. Otherwise we don't accept. I just never heard that in my life. Heard it now, but I hadn't heard it then. In 1989, which is 31 years ago. And we just come from the West, and we just come from ISKCON temples, and we didn't know. We thought we knew something, but we didn't. You know, we'd been 8, 9, 10 years devotee. We're not really devotees, but we'd seen that, and that was us, 8, 9, 10 year devotee. But when we got to Bhubaneswar, after the first class, Jagat Patti said to me, in all my years in the movement, I've never learnt that much as I've learned from that one class. I've learnt more from that one class than 8 or 9 years in the movement. I said, yeah, it's a fact. That one class, just one class. What to speak of day in, day out. And we were in there with class in the morning, and then we'd go and see Gurudeva around the middle of the day, and then we'd go and see him in the night again, or whatever. We were just walking in and out. It was an open door. There was hardly any Westerners there. It was all Orias, but they all had service. And our service was just to buy the Guru Maharaj. And we did it all day. And we'd just go in and ask anything, and he'd give us the answer. I remember that in Australia, a lot of misconceptions in Australia. No offence, but a lot of misconceptions. And one Maharaja had said, yes, when you get Tulsi in the Prasad, you have to swallow her. You can't chew it. It's offensive. And I was trying to do that with the manjaris and choking, you know, and I was thinking, it's not working, you know, this just doesn't work. So I went to Gurudeva and I said, Gurudeva, I explained this, Maharaji said that you have to, can't chew it. And he shook his head, he looked at me and says, what? He says, what are you going to do with the manjaris? Choke? Yeah. And he said, no, it's prasad, chew it. I said, it's a very simple question, very simple. But that's what was going on. So, and that was a small misconception. And those misconceptions are massive unless you have someone whose heart is glowing prema and it's glowing out of his whole body, and all he can think of is how to deliver everyone. Not how I can get your money, how I can get your wife or your daughter or all that nonsense, or your son, or whatever they want to do, you know. You know, someone that actually cares about others, and someone who is past the point of thinking, where is the eating, where is the sleeping, where is the mating, where is the defending?